Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. My name's Miles Ogilvie. Tony.
Hi, I'm Tony. How are you?
We're from, as the kind introducer said, from Soon Safer Happier, and our mission is to help organisations improve their outcomes. We're here to talk about governance, risk, and compliance. It's a favourite topic of mine. The talk will be about 20 minutes. We'll have 10 minutes at the end for questions if we possibly can, because we're practitioners at heart, and that narrative is what excites us, the interaction with yourselves. So please don't hold back. This is a favourite topic of mine because governance, risk, and compliance, and improving these areas can be a ninja move when you're trying to improve your flow. When I speak to the CIO who says, our agile teams all slow down to the same speed as everybody else when they hit the control gates, that's a clue that your GRC approach may not be enabling what you need and may be creating competitive risk for you. And when I speak to the chief audit officer who says our group standards haven't kept pace with the recent improvements to our delivery approach, well, that's an indicator that maybe you are accelerating as a business, but you're not managing to stay safe. So I suppose the key point here is your policies and standards are the code of your organization. And when you update that code to align with the ways of working that you have, it has a pretty interesting effect. You can find some folk who've been suspicious about how things have been done before, how things are changing, and become a lot more supportive. And what we're all here to do in these 2 days is to try to improve flow, try to improve the outcomes our organizations get. And so hooking into that supportive group of people will give you an amplifying effect for what you can achieve. So I'd encourage you to think about improving GRC areas as following this talk. If there's one message I'd like you to take away, it's if you want to go fast, you have to have strong brakes. In the context of change, what do I mean by those brakes? Well, firstly, it is culture. Culture can be one of the biggest brakes you have. We need a good operating model to ensure your brakes can apply effectively. And there needs to be a decent process supported by tooling and data. So those are our 3 topics we'll be talking about: culture, process, and operating model. Quick question. Who remembers this image from the past? Yeah, a few hands gone up. Any shout-outs? What is this? It's not Piper Alpha, it's actually Deepwater Horizon. Someone say that? So 15 years ago, this accident happened. On the day this happened, Transocean executives, the operating company, were on this rig celebrating 7 years without any incidents, without any fatalities. And the investigation after the accident looked into this to ask, was this a safe rig? And this was some kind of freak accident that was completely unpredictable and just like really sad? Or actually was that not the case? Was this 7 years of incidents that did happen but weren't reported, of systemic weaknesses building up because issues weren't being fixed? And so that when something did go wrong, the impact was far worse than it actually needed to be. And that's what the investigation concluded, that this was an unsafe rig. The culture was one of speed, was one of milestones, was one of get it done, and staff on these rigs did not feel that they could raise issues without some kind of personal consequence. So this was speed without control. I could have put up other pictures here. I could have put up pictures of a space shuttle. I could have put up pictures of grounded fleets of aircraft. I could have put up news cutouts of fines imposed on some of the largest companies in the world for massive data leaks affecting their customers. So sadly, this can happen when the emphasis is on speed without control, and no one wants that to be going on in their organization. So what can be done about culture? Sidney Dekker is a professor of safety science based in Brisbane, Australia. He's gone deep on this topic. He's worked in a variety of industries, including healthcare, and, for example, worked with a team in a hospital looking at operations that failed, tried to improve, how could they improve things? And let's be clear, when we say an operation that failed, that means the patient died. So they looked at a sample of operations where patients died. And the root cause analysis the team came up with was there were human errors, there was miscommunications, there was guidelines were not followed. Okay, this was the emphasis was on the people as the problem and workers essentially not following the instructions that they were meant to. So if you believe that, that's an industrial mindset, workers are the problem and need to be following the instructions more. If you believe that, then I guess it's great that AI is coming and the robots will save us all. But maybe it's not that simple, okay, because Sidney Dekker went deeper with this team and they looked at a sample of operations which were successful, where the patient lived. And they found that in those operations where the patient lived, there were human errors and guidelines were not followed and there were miscalculations. Okay, the absence or the presence of these factors did not determine whether the operation succeeded or failed. Instead, in the operations that succeeded, what existed was the ability to say stop, was equality of voice across the team involved, was curiosity and open-mindedness. Okay, so this is psychological safety, and I know, dear audience, you will know about psychological safety. I'm sure you're aware of Amy Edmondson's writings. My point for raising it here is you may not have thought about the impact of psychological safety in maintaining safety inside your organization for your customers and for your colleagues. So if you want to go fast and stay safe, first message is this is 80% about getting the culture right, and it's 20% about process. Tony, what's next?
Well, funnily enough, even though it is 80% culture, when we talk to people, they want to talk about the process and the operating model. So at least we need to be conscious, if we are changing process or operating model, what are we trying to achieve with the culture? So if we're talking operating model first. Operating model, what is the as is? Well, the current situation in organisations is that in the risk and control community within your organisations, it's a specialist career path that you can evolve for yourself. And in fact, the more specialist you can be, the better. So in larger organisations, and the bigger the organisation, especially in any kind of regulated industry, we find that the risk community gets fragmented into more and more specialist areas, and those people become deep specialists. So you end up with security architecture, security assurance, data governance, data privacy, fraud, compliance, third-party risk, tech risk, service transition, service management, enterprise architecture. All of those are real teams that we've worked with, real heads of, with tens, maybe even hundreds of people in their team to take care of those risk concerns. So how do we engage with them? If we've got 7, 11 different teams to engage with, how do the teams engage with all of those? Well, each of those 7 or 11 different concerns come up with their own process for engagement. So you can send an email to their email box, you can fill in the 50 questions on SharePoint, you can be in an invisible queue and wait and hope for service. That's just to get to talk to someone. Then there's another 50 questions about the actual topic. So all of these in different engagement models create friction, obviously, for teams. So what's the operating model pattern that we find works? Well, it's just like cross-functional agile teams. Cross-functionality is the magic sauce. So if we have representation from all of these different risk areas in one team, now it's obviously a virtual team and you're not going to go and change their line management on them, as you don't need to in an agile team either. But if they come together, what do they learn? Well, for a start, they realise that their deep specialism is not so specialist after all. There's quite a bit of overlap between these sets of concerns, and risk is risk. So for example, I'm working with an organisation at the moment where the data privacy team is tiny and fairly new and a bit stretched. But by coming together into the safety team, what they realised was that actually half the data privacy concerns are met if you've got good cybersecurity, and enterprise architects are out there engaging with all the teams. They're the ones that can help us make sure this happens. And by working together, they're able to meet the risk objectives. So how do they engage? Who do they engage with? So you've got some safety teams, great, that's hard work enough. They're talking to, I'm going to use the word value streams, I'm sure they're called product teams, tribes, fleets, squads, whatever they're called in your organisation. In It might be a small team. That would be great if a small team was able to deliver value end to end, or it might be a team of teams as we've shown here, with little leadership trio that's leading the delivery in a product sense. If they have a safety team that they invite into the house and treat as part of their own leadership team, as an extended leadership team, if you like, the safety team is on board with the same outcomes from the get-go. The outcomes of that value stream become the outcomes, the shared outcomes for the safety team. And if the safety team has outcomes that they need from a risk and compliance point of view, they're folded in to the outcomes of the value stream. And so suddenly there's a shared incentive, a joint incentive to succeed together, rather than it being we're trying to do something but you keep saying no. So that's operating model, desirable. What about process? Miles, how is it at the moment?
Thanks. So, how work flows through a traditional organisation. This is your project. If you have projects still in your organisation, there's a bunch of stage gates to get started in your project. If you're lucky, in a more modern organisation, the word sprint might be written 10 times in the middle of your project. And then there's some stage gates you'll have at the end to control your go-live process. If you wouldn't mind clicking on, Tony. So those stage gates then include the various different silos Tony's just been talking about. There's probably a few other governance functions involved as well. In one organisation I was at, we put a stopwatch on the process from code complete through to live. This was for a Hello World application, but the risk of the application didn't matter. So this was an exercise to see how long does this thing take. It took us 3 months to get that code live. It took 20 man-days of project management effort in accelerating through all of those milestones, in registering, in providing the artifacts, and explaining what's happening. Okay, so that's waste. What it results is the approach here is big upfront design, obviously, big risk assessment upfront, some late learning at the back, and then you have to sort of either do rework or else go live with risks accepted. So that can be what we've seen time and again. Work still happens like this in many places.
Thanks, Miles. So let's have a look at a process approach that's different. If we're doing continuous delivery, would it not follow that we need to do continuous risk assurance? So this is a pattern that we're finding in multiple organisations, especially where risk and control is a headline. So it's pretty basic. It's fairly obvious. If you've got some safety teams, some cross-functional safety teams, they're going to engage with a product team, whether that be a small two-pizza team or a big value stream. They're engaging. Now, how often are they engaging, and what are they doing? Well, first of all, they're having a conversation. And it's amazing to attend. We've facilitated a lot of these introductory conversations. That first kickoff, where all of the safety team people are in the room, realising how many there are of them all, and the different concerns, and then how that's affecting the team, those realisations are big moments. But this is a long-lived relationship, so the product team starts to understand all of the different safety concerns and the real reasons for it, because it's a conversation, not a spreadsheet that you're filling out. And the safety team is understanding the outcomes the product team's trying to achieve. So they're trying to actually help them move forward rather than just be brakes. In the very initial conversation, they might figure out, well, this product team is actually working on something pretty low risk. We don't need to talk to you every day. Or they might realise this product team is working on something so critical, so new, we're going to be on your daily stand-ups, we're going to be talking to you every day. So frequency is an important outcome of those early conversations. How often do you actually need to catch up with each other, and how deeply do you need to be involved with the actual delivery? Now, what does that do? That creates a feeling of being on the same side as that team rather than pushing against each other. And of course, that takes quite a bit to achieve. It's a little bit of bump at first. At first, it may be, we've got some other quotes here, that it can be that there's a lot of suspicion initially, a cultural legacy of non-collaboration, a cat and mouse game between the people. These are all quotes that folk have said to us when we've instigated this mechanism. However, that's obviously the start, that's the value, but what are they talking about when they get together in these conversations? Well, they're talking about the business outcomes the team is trying to achieve, the product team. Now, what are those business outcomes? Is it just, we've got some new cool features that we're going to build? Are we going to be a feature factory? No, it makes a massive difference when we're talking about an actual business outcome. Miles, you've got a great story on this.
Absolutely. So there was a team I was working with recently, a technical team. They said to me, we need some new features enabled on our fantastic AWS platform because we've got a bunch of external data that we're bringing in and we need to do some quick analytics on it. And by the way, it's external data, so there's no privacy risk, it's no confidentiality, so all of the normal organizational controls really don't need to be getting in the way of us here. Now, a traditional approach would have said, we'll come back when you've got a fully detailed design, and then we'll do a full depth risk assessment. In this case, there was a safety team available, the safety team paired with that, and the data privacy SME first question is, just talk me through, what are you trying to achieve? And the answer was, well, it's all very exciting actually, because we're looking at footfall in high street stores, and we're trying to predict what the financial results are of those high street stores. Okay, and how are you predicting footfall in stores? Well, we're looking at mobile phone data. All right, so you've got geolocated mobile phone data, which ties back to people. I guess we could be looking at where people are moving to, where people's partners are during the day, and things like that if we really wanted to. Okay, so we know there's going to be obfuscation. We haven't got a design, but we know that can't happen. We know we've got a privacy issue. So by focusing on the outcome, we can have a much richer conversation much earlier before we've even gone into the details.
Thanks. That is a good example. But what are you going to do with that information? Now you know you need to mitigate a risk. How is that going to get tracked? And we're still early days here. We only know about the business outcome. Well, this team's working in a fairly normal manner. They've got a team wiki where they've described their own architecture and other attributes about themselves. They've got a backlog like everyone has. But something special that the safety team has done as pre-work, they've codified those enterprise standards, all those many mysterious and long standard documents, into what we call a risk story catalogue. And literally in a user story format, with little given when then statements, even in the acceptance criteria, you can go knock yourself out with really codifying what is this risk and what are we trying to do. So why would we do obfuscation, and what are the acceptance criteria? So this is not risk management in the traditional sense where you say there's a risk that something bad might happen and then there'd be these terrible consequences. This is actually managing the risk mitigations. What are the actions you're taking to mitigate the risk or prevent it? So in those risk stories, the knowledge is captured from the risk SMEs, but then it's tailored to the context of what the team is trying to do. So the acceptance criteria will be edited, refined, and it just goes into the refinement process of the team, like the rest of all of their work. But this was identified very early. We have achieved being able to shift that risk conversation significantly to the left. It's at the beginning when you're first kicking off. We haven't even asked you to have an architecture design yet. We're just talking about your business outcome. We've identified some risks and we're straight into your backlog. So that really creates an explicit goal for the team so that they know right up front what are those risk requirements and what will get us a yes rather than a maybe, you're there, are you there yet? But what are the specific acceptance criteria that will get us there? And this also caters for all sorts of different organisations. So obviously, if you've got a lovely automated platform that takes care of many of these concerns, well and good. So the risk story might just say, make sure you've used the capabilities of that shared platform team that they give you. Or you might be at the other end of where every time you go live and every time you release something, you have to do a manual pen test all over again. Doesn't matter. The story is on the backlog. Whatever the approach is that you're capable of doing at your current level of maturity, it can be catered for. So if all of the risk has been shift left and we're very explicit about the criteria for what yes means, then when we come to release, we no longer have a conversation, and we formalise this, that there's no need to have that conversation with your risk SMEs all over again, because you've already had all the conversations and you've already met all the acceptance criteria. So now releasing is a simple act by the team. The product owner can look, they can see the evidence, look, all these stories have been done, the acceptance criteria has been met, the evidence we track with our testing, just the same as we do all the rest of our user stories. And that therefore can go live without any further intervention or questions being asked, even automated. So whether the go live is quick, frequently, or in a fully automated fashion, or still fairly old-fashioned and slow, it doesn't matter. It's within the gift of the team to do the best they can on their path to production. This also gives us a beautiful data audit trail, if you like. And the audit trail that's there of data that's been captured is purely within the tooling of the team, the normal ways of working of the team in their backlog, all encoded there. So no particular special separate thing needed or separate process needed for the team. So that's the process. Miles, back to you.
Thanks, Tony. Righty-ho. So that's a process that Tony's talked through in a reasonable amount of detail that we have worked with multiple organisations on. It's dependent on having the right operating model in place, and that is dependent on having the right culture in place, because if you don't have the right culture in place, then whatever process or model you put in place is probably not going to work for you anyway. So just to again, reinforce, if you want to stay safe, it's 80% culture. And what that means actually is that the transformation efforts that may be going on inside your businesses need to move outside of IT and into the governance, risk and compliance areas. And that is, this community has been poorly supported by ways of working coaches or efforts. So there's often a real appetite to learn amongst that community. Great. So request today, please reach out to those colleagues in your organisation. I'm going to just finish here on 5 things to get started with, some practical pointers. Firstly, build consensus about the urgency and the need for improving GRC in your organisation. Create a pilot environment that's safe to learn. Help the safety team and the delivery team have those conversations, because it won't be natural. It will be a bit stilted to start with. That will require some facilitation. Experiment with the process. Find out what works for you. Start small. You don't need to put in place a whole end-to-end thing like we were just talking about here. Just start with something. And yes, we know you'll need some tooling to improve your visualizations and tracking, but you can make it simple to start with. Just get started with Confluence or something like that. And with that, I would like just to open the floor to questions, really. Tony and I, practitioners, happy to talk about anything you wish.